Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Today I spoke with Donald about his book, I Could Have Been One, a book that has had a 5-star review from the Book Viral Review in the UK. And it's interesting, we were talking about the history of communism, socialism, religion, changing attitudes. And I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome to the David Watson podcast. How are you today?
It's great to be here.
And there's the book. And there is the book. And what's the book
Oh, I
called?
got the light shining on it. There we go.
I could have been one. Is that correct?
I could have been one, yes.
So what made you, well, let's start with what the book is about.
Okay.
What's the context of the book?
It is comes under the genre of historical, political, and biographical. Historical because it is full of history about the communists and socialists, not just in this country, but how it started with Karl Marx, Communist Manifesto, giving the seeds to all of this, including anarchy.
Yeah.
So it is anti-communist and anti-socialism. It is also pro-Christianity. And I give history of the Christian movement and also the history of the Bible. Because I discovered that a lot of people had not had the opportunity to learn anything about Christianity or the Bible. So I'm targeting those people mainly with this. I'm also targeting other people who just haven't thought about early history. But I discovered that there was a parallel between communism, socialism, and Christianity. So there's a connection. However, there's big differences, of course. The connection is that both deal with utopia, which comes from two Greek syllables meaning okay, my mind's going blank. Not here.
Yeah.
Or that it cannot exist. Well, the utopia here on earth that the communists and socialists want will never happen because of human nature. We are here on this earth to prepare ourselves for the next life. Now, if we believe in God, we believe in heaven and hell. And the utopia in the next life is heaven.
Yeah.
Both. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think one of the things that is difficult when it comes to people, when it comes to socialism or communism, is for people like yourself and for me, they won't remember the Cold War. They won't remember the Berlin Wall collapsing in 1989. So for people, unless somebody has taken a little bit of time to look at history, they won't understand the politics that happened around the end of the Second World War between Russia and America and, you know, the Allied forces and stuff. So there was always, you know, with Stalin, things were kind of, I think, and I'm going to misquote here because I'm kind of paraphrasing, but there was a question once with Churchill and how he allied himself with Stalin, and somebody said he recognized that the necessity of it as opposed to being pleased to have done it. He was pragmatic in his choices because it was the war. but it didn't
Yes.
mean he was happy with what he was achieving. But I also think, and I'm by in no stretch a fan of communism. I actually think especially when I see it on social media and students and stuff talking about socialism and communism and stuff, I'm more and more convinced that they've no idea what it is. And but
Correct.
I also think one of the difficulties for people today is the capitalist system is also failing them. It's not what it
Mm.
once was, and maybe my head is just full of an illusion of fond memories from when I was a child. Um, but it's
Well,
the system today isn't working either. So I think when people feel disjointed, they search for something else that isn't there, and and I think that applies to religion. I I look at a lot of the faiths today, and they're not how I was raised a Catholic, and the Catholic Church today
oh,
is not the one that I remember as a child.
right. I
So
am Catholic.
right, yeah, so I mean, I would be what would be described as a Catholic. The reason I don't refer to myself as a Catholic is because I don't go to church anymore. Um,
Hmm.
but I've not.
Okay.
I don't. If you ask me what my faith is, I would say I don't know what I would say. What I would say is it's important to me, but it's a feeling inside. And
Hmm.
when I lose that feeling inside, I feel very isolated and alone. And when I have the feeling inside, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about life. I figure that, and I do mean that in the sense that I do believe there is something taking care of it for me,
Yes.
you know. But I don't believe so much in this fact that it's necessary for me to walk into a building that was built by a person to worship something. I
Mm.
believe it's between me and my heart and the conversation I have with myself and the moments I spend in silence. You know.
I drifted away from Catholicism
Uh huh.
when I was young. Got out in the world, stopped going to mass,
Yeah.
and just became secular. I came back to the church. Uh, well, due to my wife, actually, because she had been Catholic and drifted away also. She and I have kind of similar history. So we came back, and it has more meaning to me now as an adult than when I was growing up. But everything you have said concerning how young people are not informed of their history,
Yeah.
but how we remember events. But I address all of that in the book. And I don't promote the Catholic Church, but I do give the history. And I believe it is the church that goes back to the apostles and
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And so I give that early history of the church. And then I talk about Luther. I give Bible history of how the Bible was developed and why we have the Old Testament and the New
Yeah.
Testament. So I go into detail in these issues. And I use my own life. That's the biographical part, is that I use my own life to show what has happened socially and politically
Yeah.
from the time I was born during World War II. My
Okay.
father was over in your country preparing for D-Day,
Wow.
and he drove well, he was a tank commander,
Hmm.
and his tank went in on the shores and on into Germany.
Yeah.
Um, I never really thought about that, even when I talked with him a little. But there were some good points he talked about, some dangerous points that he talked about. He liberated a concentration camp. He would not say much about that, except it was the worst thing he had ever seen.
It's funny. My granddad was in World War II as well, and
Mm.
he died when I was about seven, I think 6 or 7. So I knew him. I knew him, but not obviously old
Yes.
enough to have a conversation with him about the war. And he fought in Japan as well. And my mum said that growing up, he wouldn't talk about any of it. He all he ever said was no good comes from talking about the past. And
Uh,
I've always assumed what he meant was it doesn't do me any good to talk about what I saw or what I did.
mm,
And it's kind of, I think, one of those, like, I have to live with my experiences. I'm not going to share them,
mm,
because living with them is enough of a burden. you know
mm.
and that's the only assumption I can make. But even there were a couple of, like, back then, like, groups that sort of, social group where retired soldiers, old soldiers, had would get together, like in a sort of social club, and because we have them here still, like there's a Dunkirk Veterans Club and stuff like that, which remembers it.
Oh,
And he had nothing to do with any of them. He didn't want to relive any of it. And he went. He got married, had 3 kids, and
mm,
he was a wonderful man, a wonderful father, wonderful grandfather. But he would not in any way discuss what he, very limited. My mum said the only time she ever heard him discussing it was when there was, other soldiers around him who'd experienced the same. And but she said, but he wouldn't go out of his way to discuss it.
uh,
But I think it's,
common. That is common among all veterans.
yeah. And I think as well, it's hard to comprehend for people today. So for context, my grandfather was Irish and was
Mm,
from just outside Dublin. And
okay.
and you think at that time in Ireland, him and his brother, I don't know how large the family were, but there were several brothers and sisters. But him and one of his brothers left Ireland to join the British Army to fight in the war.
Mm,
That's not something you did, although a lot of Irish did fight in the war, but a lot of them were probably hungry, and,
oh,
do you know what I mean? Didn't have many options. But whatever happened, he never went home again. He stayed, and he never spoke to his family again.
mm,
So
uh,
whatever happened with him and his, whatever him and his brother did, the family, they never spoke to the family again. As far,
yeah.
and again, my mum would say, like, you would ask him about it. It's just no good comes from talking about the past.
Mm,
And
mm,
it's just trying to explain. Like I said, you try and explain that to somebody today that believes that communism and socialism is a solution. You're like, you realize. I used to. I haven't seen her for many many years, but I used to have a Russian girlfriend, and so I've actually been to Moscow 5 times.
mm,
And this was around 2009 to about 2011, 2012. And
okay.
she was slightly older than me and was an adult in communism times. She was an adult in 1989, in her 20s. And her and her mum, on one level, remembered communism fondly, but also, yeah, they recognised it wasn't fair for everybody, just like capitalism. But one of the things I don't think people realise is, like she said, they never ran out of anything. They were never short of anything. Not in Moscow, at least, not where they were. They said, but you didn't have choice either. You know,
Right.
When it came to like it's time you need a new winter coat. Well, you can have this winter coat, or you don't have a winter coat.
Mm.
They were your options. It was quite limited.
Yeah, I did not realize it was to that depth of control.
Well, that was all that was available in the shop.
Okay, but
So whereas somebody in America would think, well, I can go to name how many brands there are where you can go and buy a coat in the USA,
mhm, yeah,
and how many different types of coats you can have, how many colors, how many sizes. No, there's a coat. This is the coat for women. This is the coat for
now
men.
now here, small shops have a hard time getting merchandise because the big companies
Mm.
want them to buy a certain amount.
Yes.
And they may not, the seller may not even sell that amount in 20 years.
No, it's true.
They
So
so it
when you,
limits what the seller can get and what the consumer can get from
yes.
that seller.
So you were saying you were born in the was it the late 30s or early 40s?
In 43.
And
So
whereabouts was
it
that?
was the middle of the war.
Middle of the war. Whereabouts?
Indianapolis, Indiana.
Indianapolis, Indiana. And what was life? What's your earliest memories of that life?
Oh, the life itself. Well, there was tragedy. I don't remember my father.
Okay.
Um, I had an older sister. My earliest memories of life in the family was of my grandmother, mother, and my older sister. Now, she was killed by a drunk driver when I was 2 years old, and she was going on 7. So
Wow.
that tragedy hit me early,
Yeah.
excuse me, when I got into school. It was it was like that movie, A Christmas Story, since we're in the Christmas season.
Yeah. Yeah.
I relate to it. Excuse me.
That's okay.
So it was like the older I got, the more I knew about my surroundings.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know about the war. I just heard about it. And my mother and father divorced shortly after he came back. And long story short, so I never really knew him.
Yeah.
I got together with him when I was in my early 20s after I got out of the military. So I could identify somewhat with him because I had been in the military. So he told me a little, but that's the only way I actually knew him.
Okay.
And he did not live that much longer after we got together. I did not really pay that much attention to what was going on in the world when I was growing up. But I talk about what society was like during that time period in the book.
Yeah.
I also give, for example, the first president I remember is Eisenhower. And I say that in the book. And I say, I remember the news media just loved it when he went to Florida to play golf.
Yeah.
And I follow that up with, I wonder how many deals were made on that golf course.
Yeah. Yes. Very much so.
Well, so I interject like that into what happened when I was growing up. And I give what society was like, open air markets,
Yeah.
which we don't have today. When I was in France, I discovered they have open air markets. But we don't. Um, so it's showing the difference between what it was like in the 50s, politically and socially, and then going into the 60s when I became an adult, and then on from there, and how things changed, and how the communists first was taking hold and proceeding with their plans in America. But then it got to the point where the socialists came to the forefront to take the country politically, and the communists stepped back. And then I bring it up to this century, and I don't bring it. Well, to see, the book was published in 21, so I stopped writing it and during COVID, actually, about 1920 or about 2020.
Yeah.
So I take it up to about that point, and I give what is happening now and the way the communists infiltrated churches and youth groups, and also how the socialists still uses that tactics.
Yeah.
There's nothing new. That's one of the themes in the book. There's nothing new. It's just new labels for the same actions. The book is well referenced. I give the references right in the text, so the reader can do further research on their own. I use other people's books. I reference, I got permission to do so. Or I mention a book, which I use fair use laws for that. I also did a lot of online research. I had saved material. I had received, say, emails. I ended up on a conservative email circuit. I might be in a doctor's office and I see a magazine that addresses that issue. And I'd ask if I could have that magazine. And there would be an article in there that I would cut out and I would reference in the book.
Okay, so it's
So
well
I used
researched.
a lot of different types of as you can see, the book is thick. It's 426 pages. There's also graphics in it. There's 2 maps. It involves the Senate, the U.S. Senate, had received a proposal for a piece of legislation, and it did not have any maps in it. It only had the text. One of the senators got curious about the meaning of the words that was in that text, and she asked a friend of hers to draw up a map that would coincide with the words, showing what those words meant. She used that map the next morning as a visual aid to show those senators what they were going to be voting on. It got tabled. It is still tabled. It can be brought forth at any point. But if that legislation had gone through, the structure of America today would have been different, and we would be under control.
When did that happen? When did that happen?
It's been a while. I'd say it was definitely the later part of the 20th century.
Okay, so would that have been under the Bush or Clinton administration?
Let's see, it wasn't under Clinton. Uh, may have been under Bush.
Yeah.
That's actually, I did not think about who the president was when I was reading about this. But that map has gone all over the internet. Um, and people using it to show how the communists and socialists plan under the United Nations
Mm-hmm.
to take this country down and rebuild it into a communist country. That's the other key. The United Nations is using, well, there's Agenda 21, now there's Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2050. Agenda 21 established using the environment to gain control. For example, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, which Clinton got started. When he did that, that under the policy of the United Nations, it meant that this country would promote Agenda 21. United Nations was never meant to be a world ruler, but that is what they want to do.
Yeah. There's definitely some rumors around that.
And the Agenda 30 and 50 developed out of their reviewing what goals had been met and what goals still needed to be met, and the objectives needed to do that. So it isn't just the communists and socialists in this country trying to take the country. The UN itself is trying to take this country.
Well, I think it's one of the things that, as I've gotten older, one of the things I've always noticed is that there always seems to be someone trying to be in charge, whilst telling me it's for my freedom, for my protection of freedom. It's just like, well, you know. So
it's one of the tactics.
Yeah. So what prompted you to write the book? Where you know, because there's, and what I mean by that is there's a point in time where you had no intention of writing a book, and one day you would have woken up and started getting an itch that needed to be scratched to write a book. When did that start?
That's a good way to put it. I retired from formal employment, and I had the feeling that I wanted to write, which I enjoy writing. I discovered that back when I was in the Navy and writing home to my parents and also to girls who were friends.
Yeah.
But I did not know what I wanted to write about. Well, I was involved in the conservative movement at the time, and some people said, well, why don't you write about this? But that wasn't it. I didn't feel that was it. Well, I ended up learning too much, and it started affecting me mentally and emotionally of what could happen to this country. And so I took a break, and I came back here to where I was raised. Spent about 2.5 months here. While I was here, it was in a homily during Mass. And since this is going to be edited, I will say it was during church, during the sermon, that it clicked with me about the connection between communism and socialism and Christianity.
Okay, just quickly, what makes you think I edit this?
It's my understanding this is being taped.
Oh yeah, but I play it live. I play it as if it's a live conversation. It will go up as it is. Yeah. No, we're not live. Well, I do record.
Oh, okay.
But I rarely. The only time I ever edit anything out is if something technical happens, you know,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, in that case, I said it for the sake of non-Catholics,
So
people
yeah,
who might not
yeah.
know what
Nah,
Mass is.
upload as if it's a real conversation because it is. So this little conversation we've had, I won't remove that because I think it spoils it.
Oh, thank you.
So
Um,
so you were
so,
you were saying about
I,
you could see the connections between the three different groups.
yes, yes. Under Christianity, our goal is to prepare for the next life.
Yeah.
Communists and socialists want to have heaven on earth,
Mm-hmm.
but the only way heaven's going to happen is in the next life. But they want utopia or the equality of all. Well, now they have billionaires in Russia. So that
Yeah.
that proves right there what it's like he was talking about capitalism here is not the way it used to be. Um, that's like a modified capitalism, but it's also because of the communist socialist movement changing that.
Yeah, I think something that's changed significantly. So there's a couple of things that I don't think people really understand about socialism or communism, whatever they want to determine it as. If you're the head of some large organization under socialism or communism, you get more perks than the guy that turns up on the factory floor. The
Yes.
supervisor, the manager gets more perks. That's how it actually works. It's not much different to capitalism in that sense. The higher up
Yeah.
you are, the more perks you get. And I don't think
Uh-huh.
people realise that under socialism or communism, like the Orson Welles book Animal Farm. Some
Oh,
of us are more equal than others. We're all equal, but some of us are more equal than others, and
uh,
that still applies. It's the book is perfect for that reason. It's the perfect analogy of how communism and socialism works. But I think the other thing that's changed significantly is we've now kind of moved from a capitalism to a globalism. So once upon a time, capitalism could be much more localized, and
yeah.
the only kind of international companies that you and I would have heard of were airplane companies. I mean,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
what I mean. We
Mhm.
didn't really know about large corporate organizations. They were called conglomerates, whereas now it's just called globalism. And
Mhm.
there are companies that literally own something in every country around the world. They've got an
Mhm.
interest in everything. So they're no longer aligned with what you and I might think is best for our local community, let alone what's best for our country. And that they will come in and they will buy up company assets, they will buy up countries' assets, and they then start running them on an accountant sheet because they're sat in an office somewhere just looking at numbers, and they're like, well, we can be more efficient. and
Mhm.
and I think that's probably one of the reasons there's so much disparity today.
I agree with what you say. Um, but there's still the political aspect of it.
Well, because the globalists,
Or,
the people that like the global organizations, are also the people that lobby your politicians
mhm.
and change the laws that allows them
Yes,
to buy up assets in the country. Um,
yes.
do you know what I mean? And it's just like they all, they'll do a deal on a Florida golf course where they're allowed, suddenly they're allowed to buy up, invest, and
Uh-huh.
it's not in the interests of the countries. It's in the interests of
Right.
somebody's friends of friends,
Yeah.
sort of thing. And a small amount of people make a large amount of money at the expense of the rest of us.
The labor unions started out for a good reason.
Mm.
They were needed because the employers um, they gave some to the employees, but the the employees still had it really hard.
Yeah.
Plus, there was no child labor laws, uh, no safety regulations. So the union started out for good reason. However, as soon as they started out, came the communists,
Mm.
all for the worker. That was their model,
Mm.
all for the worker. Plus, the crime families came in
Yeah.
because they saw an avenue to gain wealth. And so that was, there were many good things that started out for a good reason, but ended up being taken over or at least influenced. And labor unions today, I don't think they really have the welfare of the worker in mind.
No,
It's
again,
they
I
grow the
think it's the same thing.
membership.
I think it's the
Yeah.
same thing that happens all the time. That once something becomes too big or gets too much power, it can't
Mm-hmm.
serve the person it's supposed to serve because
Right.
the interests are just not aligned anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
it's just like it doesn't. It sounds like, well, that doesn't make sense, but once something grows to a size that pardon the pun, but it no longer knows its arse from its elbow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not in service to each other because they've just become too big, and the guy at the top, the person at the top running it, no longer has any connection to the young man walking through at 18 on his first day. Whereas once upon a time, the person that would run your union probably worked on the shop floor as an apprentice
Mm-hmm.
and worked his way up and
Yes.
went through the union route. Whereas now,
Mm-hmm.
your union rep has probably never been on a factory floor.
Right.
Probably. I often say that I think one of the things that's missing from society today is not enough people have ever had to work outside and dig a ditch.
Ah.
And it could be dig a ditch, work in a factory, fix a car, work haulage and work two weeks away. But there's people out there today that have never experienced any sort of like manual labor where you're cleaning out ditches, digging fences, putting in posts in
Mm-hmm.
all weathers, all 7 days a week, whatever, because the jobs just need to get done. And
Uh-huh.
now it's all about, well, my welfare and my feelings before you even
Yes.
turn up for work. It's just like, I don't know if I can make it today because I don't feel like I'm in the mood for it. Whereas, could you imagine that, explaining that rule to your parents or grandparents? Do you remember your grandparents? You mentioned your grandmother, didn't you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How would you explain to your grandmother, if you could miraculously talk to her right now, how would you explain to your grandmother that today there are places where people can phone in sick because they don't feel like today is a good day to work?
They're probably rolling in their graves. Been rolling.
And that's where we're at.
Well, the entitled,
Yeah.
the philosophy of I'm entitled just because I exist.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that has happened is because of the entitlement attitude, they will apply for a job, but they will say, well, I can't work the hours you're wanting me to. I can work these hours, but I want this day and this day off. And
that's it, because I can vaguely remember a time. I mean, obviously things changed significantly in my lifetime, but I can remember a time where you could literally turn up for a job interview and they would offer you the job and would be annoyed that you couldn't start the day before.
oh,
It's like, we're doing you a favor. You'd be like, I can start on Monday. They'd be like, but it's Thursday today. Why can't you start tomorrow? You know,
Mhm.
and
Back in the 60s, I remember I applied for a job and the interviewer asked me if I would be willing to shave my beard.
yeah.
And I said, well, my beard is not going to put food on the table. So if you want me to shave it, I'll shave it.
I remember having an interview as well, and I was offered the job, and one of the conditions of being offered the job was that I had my hair cut.
Ah,
You know, and because
uh,
yeah, whereas today they'd be like, well, that's a reason to go to court, whereas
yes,
back then, and I'm talking about the 90s, it was still, if you want a job, these are the conditions that you work in.
yes.
And we
Mhm.
didn't complain. It was just no, that is
That's
correct.
the way it was.
Yeah. So, um,
The
so what? Going back to your when you were growing up, because the book will have a lot of those foundations in, won't they? What you were taught growing up.
yes, yes.
So, what was that early life about? Where were you again?
I was here, same place when I was actually growing up. And the things that I mention in the book are, for example, learning about the golden rule: do
Mm-hmm.
unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Uh, there is also um, be involved in one's church, one's community, work a full day's honest work for an honest dollar, um, be polite,
Yeah.
say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes or no, sir, be considerate of others, be respectful of others and their property. Um, it was it was totally a different time. The values were actually taught by the parents and by the teachers.
Yeah.
Uh, I had a paper route, and something would happen. I'd go into the store to sell the owner the paper, and maybe he and a couple of other guys were talking about a subject. I would walk in, and they would give their attention to me talking about this. And half the time, I wouldn't even know what they were talking about. But it was their teaching me that what they were talking about that happened should not have happened, should not
Yeah.
be done. So there was teaching all around about the values, the do's and the don'ts of a proper society. Um, then let's see. Well, by the time the '60s happened, that's when I enlisted in the military,
Yeah.
and people in the military at that time were all raised with these principles, at least to some degree. We all had the same history up to that point. Uh, but, oh, patriotism,
Patriotism was a
that
big one.
was a biggie.
Mm.
Yes. And our fathers and sometimes mothers supported the war effort, either by being in the military or working in a factory. Or my stepdad was 4F. He had a damaged eardrum, and the Army wouldn't take him. But he worked shipping docks in San Francisco.
Okay.
So that was his way of supporting the war effort. Um, we were taught about the evils of communism. In fact, we had the drills of atomic bomb gets dropped and you go under the desk And not that that would have done much good,
No,
but it
no,
was
it
something,
wouldn't.
I guess,
we
that,
we felt we felt better because I remember those drills as well, vaguely. I have memories of those drills, there used to be a cartoon they used to show us when I was at school, and I'm sure it was called Gone with the Wind, but it was a cartoon,
oh,
not the film, not the film. I think it was a
right.
cartoon, and it was about an English couple, and yeah, effectively, if the bomb gets dropped, you hide under the table, and
Oh,
you stay indoors for as long as you can. And of course, they eventually all die of radiation poisoning because you know the wooden
yeah,
door is not going to is not going to help you survive
right.
the bomb. But we felt safe in our ignorance, and that was good. Um,
Mhm.
I just want to pull it forward to coming back to your faith. Was there anything that significantly changed, or again, was it just kind of an itch that started to need scratching, and you found yourself coming back?
Uh, well, I was more mature, and well, at that time I was leaning towards liberalism, and I could have been a socialist. That's what the title of the book is about.
Hmm.
Never, I would not have been a communist. I was taught the evils of communism. I did not know what real socialism was until I started this journey of research
Yeah,
and and became part of the conservative movement. Um, so I was still kind of in a leftist zone, but I came back to the church and became involved in it. Um, was an example to my children
yeah,
concerning the faith. Uh, but the more I became involved in the church, the more I realized the importance of it. Um, Now, I did have, like you have, the belief that it's between God and I.
mm,
Well, that's true. It is between God and I, but the church is an aid
yeah,
to do it. And I do believe in the transformation of in the essence of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. Um, so I moved from kind of where I was, um, well, taking politics out of it, kind of where I was when I was growing up in the church. So when I came back, I was still at that point. But the more I became involved in the church, the more it meant to me, the more I understood the why.
yeah,
And it made sense. And I'm not happy with some of the things that have happened, especially lately in the church with the Vatican.
yeah,
But the church is composed of human beings who are sinners, who
yeah.
are uh, have the capacity
I think
to
sometimes,
err.
yeah, I think sometimes what people, when I hear criticism of, say, the Vatican or the Church of England, I always point out to people that we can call it the Bible, we can call it Jesus. I'm going to say, for the benefit of just terminology, let's talk about Jesus. Jesus was always
Okay.
consistent in his message.
Yes.
People are not.
Right.
They will talk
Mm-hmm.
about his message while not being consistent with the message. And
Mm-hmm.
that's nothing to do with, it's not even to do with the church. That's to do with the people within the church.
Mm-hmm.
The church
Yes.
itself, the message of our Lord Jesus, the message of God, the message from the Bible, has always been consistent. It's never
Yes.
wavered in its consistency. but the people who are supposed to take care of the values,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of inconsistency there.
One of the issues that I cover in the book, well, in fact, I gave a book report on a woman by the name of Bella Dodd. Excuse me. She was fully Italian. She was raised in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And then she came to America, went to school here, went to college, came across communism, and it made sense to her. And plus, the Catholicism was not really promoted in the home.
Yeah.
So she was weak in it. And she became a communist. She made it up to the national level of their administration.
Oh, wow.
That was where she started realizing, wait a minute, something's wrong. This isn't what I signed up for. But during her time as a communist, she and others found people who would infiltrate the church. They would become Catholic, they would become priests, they would go up to, say, bishop, to people of influence within the church. The idea was to change the church from within so it would not even be recognizable of the original church. And that infiltration still has an influence today. Bella Dodd she left communism and she was ostracized at the same time. She was persecuted. She ended up giving testimony before the House Un-American Activities hearings. And she was not the only one in the same situation that testified. But she testified about this infiltration. There was one point when she said she would speak of a certain issue, but she would not say it for public record. Now, what I have in the book is public record, but there was other sources that I was able to use, and it is believed that what she talked about behind closed doors was the infiltration of the Catholic Church to the point of influence that went up so high. If it got into the Vatican, I don't know. I have not found concrete evidence that that happened. But she testified.
Yeah.
It went up really high. The consistency of what Jesus said and did and what the apostles said and did, that's why I will never leave the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I follow Christ. I don't follow the people in the church.
And I think that's where things have got missed, where people start following the church and not the message and words of Christ, and understand that the church and the structure of the church is only a roof to sit under. But it's that the words of Jesus is what you should be following and listening to.
Yes.
And I think when people start talking about, again, the church, church was probably the first global organization. But people forget sometimes that if when you look at churches at a localized level, there's a fairly interesting fact about pretty much anywhere in Europe, and it would apply to America as well. If you look at the setup of America when it was, certainly as it was spreading out west, every community at some point would have had a focal point of a church and a saloon. There's an interesting thing in the UK and around Europe that if you look at most small communities before they expanded into towns and cities, there was a church, some form of inn, pub, and a farm, some form of farm, i.e. food. You know what I mean? And if you look at the history of America, every small community started with some form of shop or inn, a church, and some sort of, and a pub. You know what I mean? There would have been, it's effectively mind, body, and spirit.
Now, the pub, to me, the pub is spatial. It's community socializing.
Yeah. Well, because also,
whereas
if
here we have a bar, but the old-fashioned bar had an aspect of the pub.
Yeah.
But the bar, you just went, you drank, swapped stories, whatever. And if you didn't know how to have just a few, you got drunk.
Yeah. But also,
so it became an evil reputation.
But also as well, people forget the early saloons, inns, pubs, whatever we want to call them. They were for people to stay in. People slept there. People ate there. They were for travelers. They were focal points for a community. And
the original inn.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the evolution. Their roots are that they were effectively safe spaces for travelers to sleep under, where you could get food and shelter. And of course, and that expanded again. That's how communities expanded. As communities expanded, a church would arrive, and you would then and these were the when I say the foundations, these are the necessities for communities to grow. And I think today, if we look at our smaller towns today, and look at what our religious buildings or the churches, whatever you want to call them, they do still within the community, promoting the community, how they still help the community. It is all still there. A lot of what people are looking for, what they think is missing from their life, is actually still found in the church. But they look at church as a national thing and not the church on their doorstep.
I'm not comparing the church to, say, a club.
No.
But I was in the Lions Club, and it's international. But the reason I got involved in it was because of what the local Lions Club was doing, helping the community and people in the community. Yeah. So that coincides with what you're saying about the church. Yeah. Yes,
and that used to be the role of the church. That used to be the role, and that role is still there for people that want to help the communities. I'm just conscious of time, so it's because we've been talking for an hour.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I've just got one.
It's been a pleasure.
Sorry.
It has been a pleasure.
Oh no, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. But I have a random question that I'd just like to ask guests, and it serves no purpose than just being a random question, and it's purely, if you can imagine, for whatever reason, you have access to a time machine, right? So you've got access to a time machine. Where would you travel back to? What car would you drive, and what music would you be listening to?
Well, I would go back beyond the invention of the automobile.
Yeah, but it's a magical world, so you can take a car back to any time in history.
Victorian era.
Victorian era. Yeah.
There was a lot of development in science and in social life. There was a lot of things that still needed to be worked on, but there was a whole lot of things that was promoted, like exploring
Yeah.
the world, um, different inventions. By comparison of today, they were crude, but they were time saving, or it made life a little easier.
Yeah.
There's a lot that came out of the Victorian era, including the art and music.
Yeah.
Now, as far as music, I enjoy classical music. I don't really have a favorite composer, though.
Yeah.
I was raised during the original rock and roll era, and that is ingrained in me.
Absolutely.
But overall, I enjoy the Victorian era, and that I right now, when I changed out the white lace summer curtains for the insulated burgundy curtains down in the living room,
Uh-huh.
I also put up between the living room and the dining room. It's not an arch, but it is that kind of entrance. Burgundy curtains to separate the two rooms to keep the warmth in the room.
Yeah.
And what gave me the idea was watching like movies like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. Thick, heavy curtains were a big Victorian thing.
Yeah. And so to me, it's bringing that era into my home.
Nice.
I went to a Dickens fair
Oh, right.
in San Francisco at the Cow Palace, which that building is huge. They had turned the inside into a representation of London,
Oh, wow.
a representation of London. And the docks, the shops, the food.
That would have been amazing.
It was, and they had the characters, people in costume, the characters of the Christmas Carol walking around, and the shop people, they were in costume. Down on the wharf, there were people in costume down there, and they all had to go to a school to learn how to speak using the language of that time period.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yes. And it was wonderful. And they, of course, had the Christmas Carol play that one could attend.
There is a film version of the Christmas Carol, 1984.
Yes.
1984. I'm sure it's George C. Scott.
George C. Scott, yes. Yeah. We watched it the other night.
That's my favourite Christmas film.
Ah.
That 1984 version of A Christmas Carol. Because that, to me, is the Charles Dickens that he's talking about. And it very closely reflects the book. If you've ever read The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, it's a... But that is that... Whenever I see that film, and I make sure I watch it every December, because to me, that is Christmas. Yes. That is the Christmas Carol, and that is the film. No other film does it for me like that one.
Well, from what I understand, he was a Shakespearean actor.
Yeah, I don't doubt it for 1 second, but it's just the way that they depict it. Yeah, it's just I've pretty much watched probably about 20 different versions of A Christmas Carol because there's so many out there.
Oh,
But that seems to be the one that nails the Victorian era the best.
hmm.
And plus his presence as an actor, he was a phenomenal actor.
Yes,
You know.
yes.
But so and
My other favorite is I forget what year it was made, but it's with Patrick Stewart. He was
yes,
also an excellent actor.
yes, yeah, he does do a good version of it. I just
Mhm.
I just prefer the one, the 1984, the Christmas Carol. That's my
So
favorite.
does my wife.
I love it. I think it's great,
Favorite.
and
Mhm.
I watch it at least once every December.
Uh,
So
yes,
I probably can say I've seen it at least 100 times.
that's probably more than I have.
Yeah,
But I do the same thing as certain CDs that I will play during December during the season,
yeah. It's
and um, and we can also get a Christmas Carol on the TV too.
yeah.
So it's
That's good. It's good, and
and
that's probably a great place to stop. Thank you very much.
okay. Thank you for having me on. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. And there you have it. That's Donald and myself talking a lot about faith, a lot about communism, socialism, how capitalism is failing people. But what is the answer? Who knows? I do enjoy the discussions and I do enjoy the debates. And please do check out the book, I Could Have Been One. There's, as Donald said, it's a thick book. It will be a good read. And I hope you all enjoy it. And as always, for everybody that watches and listens, leaves their own 5-star reviews. Don't be afraid to do that now. But seriously, wherever you're from, thank you very much for the support. And wherever you're from, whatever you believe, please do take care and be blessed. Thank you.